It's lovely to see so many people here. So Concerned Summit of the Future webinar is before us. So you're all very welcome to what I know is going to be a really productive conversation from some extremely inspirational young leaders. So for a little bit of context, my name's Jenny and I'm the outgoing Climate Youth Delegate for Ireland, which meant being part of Ireland's National Climate Delegation for SB 58, SB 60 and COP 28. So before that, I was at COP27 with Concern as their Youth Climate Ambassador, and I'm now studying climate law in University of Edinburgh and working as an Earth Fellow for Education about COP29 there. But enough about me. Now for what we're all here to talk about, which is the future. So the Summit of the Future is a high-level event that's taking place in the UN this weekend. So it brings world leaders together to forge new international consensus on how to deliver better present and safeguard the future. So that piece about the present and the future being discussed together is so important because as much as the global north tends to pose climate and other global threats as a future problem or a problem for future generations, for so many people in the world right now, it's absolutely the present. So this week at the UN Summit of the Future, the aim is to develop intergovernmentally negotiated, action-orientated pact for the future. So without action, we can't save our present or our future. So today at this webinar, we have 5 incredible leaders here who are all about action. So now I just call on our speakers to introduce themselves now. Oh, I don't know who wants to go first. You guys jump into it.
Yeah, sure. I can start. Hi everyone. Welcome. My name is Danielle Curtis, and I have the honor of serving as the Secretary General this year for the National Model United Nations Conference in New York for 2025. I'm from Ireland, but I currently live in Gibraltar, and aside from NMUN, I'm also a practicing barrister. My legal practice encompasses Gibraltar, Irish and EU law with a focus on litigation and a lot of regulatory matters as well.
Thanks so much, Danielle. Maybe we jump to Magdalena next.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Magdalena. I'm a climate justice activist. I've been working with several groups, mainly Fridays for Future, which you might know as and remember as the school strikers. Furthermore, I'm part of a very lovely group of people who strike outside the Irish government building every week. I'm not in Ireland currently, but I still help out and organize campaigning. So I'm very involved in different climate groups, have also founded another local climate group in Ireland where I used to live of old people, which is very lovely, and they're still running. Yes, and my 2 main areas of focus are policy work. So I've met many politicians over time, but also outreach. I've really tried to connect the young people in Ireland and the Irish climate movement. Yes, and that's my work.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Magdalena. Now jumping over just in the order on my screen, just to Dorothy, if you want to.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Hi, everyone. My name is Dorothy Kazombomale, and I'm from Malawi. So I'm an environmentalist, a forester, and a junior climate change negotiator. I'm currently working with Green Girls Platform as the co-executive director, and I'm also a member of the National Youth Network on Climate Change. I'm very passionate about ensuring that the rights of children and the youth, particularly girls and young women, are prioritized in the context of climate change, and that they're also actively involved in local, national, and global governance structures. Thank you. Over to you, Jenny.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dorothy. It's so great to see you all. And maybe to Mohammed next.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed Naeem. I had the privilege of being the United Nations Youth Delegate last year. So I got the opportunity to represent young people in Ireland on an international level. And then within Ireland, I've been involved with loads of different youth organizations, from the Irish Second Level Students Union to Eco UNESCO. So I've kind of really been involved, and I've started my law degree now in UCC.
Well, and last but not least, Esther, if you want to take the floor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esther Ponyonga. I am from Malawi. I am a youth activist and also a climate change advocate. I am Concerned Summit of the Future campaign youth champion. I'm just excited to be here. Thank you. Over to you, Jenny.
Amazing. I know I'm super excited that everyone's here too, because I think we're going to have a really great discussion today. So to kick things off on a more hopeful side, I might start by asking Mohammed and Dorothy, maybe you guys could share with us some of your hopes for the Summit of the Future that's going to be on this weekend in New York.
I can start. um, so yeah, Summit of the Future is something that being at the UN for the past year is something that everyone has been gearing towards for the past 2 years, really. But like as a young person, my hopes would be young people are truly involved with the multilateral system, with the United Nations system. Young people are involved through the youth delegate program, but it needs to be a lot more meaningful. So that would be one of my hopes. And we have the Sustainable Development Goals, these kind of global goals. So with I'd like to see concrete kind of a concrete action plan to come out of the Summit of the Future, that all the global all countries can work towards. We need to see more strength in multilateralism right now. As young people or just as kind of society looking into international cooperations, we might be a bit disillusioned by the whole system. So I think we really need to strengthen multilateralism. So I hope from the Summit of the Future that we see more strengthened cooperation between countries. And then just it says it in the name, just future-proofing policies, ensuring that we're taking into account future generations, that we're not overusing our resources, and that our policies are taking into account the future generations.
Amazing. And Dorothy, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. For me, what I hope from Summit of the Future is it's mostly focused on the participation of young people. I believe that youth participation is crucial because young people represent the future generation and they will have to face the long-term consequences of today's decisions. The decisions that we make today, the decisions that we make tomorrow will have a huge impact on the young people today and the children of today. So my hope is that Summit of the Future should be able to create institutional frameworks that allow meaningful inclusion of young people in decision making at all levels, be it local, national, and international. And this doesn't just mean having token youth delegates, having them say that, oh, okay, we're able to have young people to attend as delegates, but also making sure that they are actively incorporating their ideas and the solutions into policy discussions. Because I'm pretty sure that all of you can agree with me, young people are innovative, they bring fresh perspectives, and they're doing so many things on the ground, and they are also most likely to be able to challenge the status quo. So making them to be valuable stakeholders when it comes to shaping new transformative strategies would be great for a sustainable future. And having said that, as young people that are already implementing things, but they often lack resources to be able to upscale what they're already doing, to upscale the initiative, whether it's climate related or health related. So it would be really great if the summit could be able to promote the creation of funding mechanisms that can be able to ensure that there's a fair distribution of resources or mentorship programs as well to be able to support the already existing youth-led organizations that are there, their innovations and their campaigns, because investing in the youth will be able to make sure that we are ensuring that there is a next generation of leaders. Thank you, Jenny.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dorothy. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think including youth ideas is kind of the theme of today. So Concern Summit of the Future webinar today is the perfect place to share some of the work that Concern's been doing to really make sure that young people's ideas have been taken into account. And as you say, all of the kind of innovation and skills that you have. So over the last few months, Concern has carried out several youth dialogues for 18 to 30-year-olds in some of their program countries and offices. So the aim of these dialogues was to get the thoughts of young people on global issues and to get their messages to world leaders ahead of the summit this weekend. So some of the main topics that came up are climate change, conflict, food, nutrition, imagining the future, and then some direct messages for world leaders too. So the content from these dialogues were turned into questionnaires, a questionnaire that was shared with country teams and young people around the world, particularly in some of Concern's program countries such as Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Bangladesh. And there was a chance to give more inputs in that way too. So the questionnaires findings have been used to create a youth declaration, which was turned into a petition. So if you're on the webinar and you haven't signed this already, there's a link to this in the chat. So if you'd like to fill this in after the webinar today, then that would be great. So now we have the privilege of hearing from Esther about how these dialogues went, and then a little bit from Dorothy about the kind of situation in Malawi, just to really, take on what we're saying here that we want from this weekend. We want young people's inputs and ideas directly. So the floor is yours, Esther, and then Dorothy. Thanks.
Thanks, Jenny. So the youth dialogue here in Malawi was amazing. It was good to see young people from different sectors coming together and have a dialogue of their issues and their concerns. And for me, what I really liked was the passion to say, we want these world leaders to listen to us. Well, in the youth integration, we're using the word wiser. We want them to listen to our issues. We also want to be included in this discussion. So the issue was to say, most of the times when it comes to these issues or discussions, these world leaders will just bring us in somewhere. We're not part of the process from the beginning to the end. So what the Malawi Youth Dialogue really centered on was to say, no, we need to be involved from the beginning to the end of this type of discussion when it comes to youth inclusion. I think the other issue was to do with climate change. That was really burning, was to do with climate change. We all know that most of the effects of climate change affect countries like ours, like Malawi. I would give an example to say, starting from the past years, especially last year, we had the Cyclone Freddy that is still affecting Malawi's economy till today. So what the young leaders were saying to say, we need to be compensated. That is where we are having the issues of climate finance. So that's what happened. But it was a very good discussion to see how young people are really eager when it comes to issues that are affecting us presently and the issues that will affect us in the future. Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, so basically the current situation in Malawi, I'll talk about climate change very much because right now Malawi is facing a challenging climate change situation whereby we're experiencing rising temperatures. As for me personally, and from my personal experience, I would say I did not experience winter this year. And this is just enough evidence to show you that the bipolar behavior of the climate is showing us that, okay, climate change is really happening enough to be able to eradicate an entire season, because we're so used to saying, okay, we usually have rainy season from August to December, and then it has shifted from November to February or from December to March. But this time it's like an entire season did not really happen because we had the sun out, it was hot, and you'd actually even use the fan, yet it was winter. So I feel like that is something that is causing a concern, and that just also shows us that there's really an impact of climate change. And also we have been having irregular and change in rainfall patterns whereby it has been leading to droughts and floods. And this has actually impacted a lot of districts in Malawi. Last year, just like what Esther already said, that we've been having cyclones, and this year we had flash floods. And this happened in Kota district earlier this year in March. And there were a lot of schools that were impacted. We had about 22 primary schools that were impacted and 2 secondary schools that were impacted and 12 schools that were turned into camps. And if each school has like about 1,000 students or more, then how many children are not able to go to school just because there are floods? And according to the Department of Disasters Management Affairs in Malawi, they said about 92,000 people were impacted alone by these flash floods. And this is just one district alone. So a lot of people, they were affected by these floods. And also when it comes to drought, Malawi has been experiencing a lot of drought, especially in the southern region of Malawi. I can give an example whereby in Mangochi district, about 600 people are eating chidedze. And chidedze in English is buffalo beans. These are actually poisonous, they are toxic. And the leaves of the buffalo beans actually, like, if you come into contact with them, you feel itchy. So imagine if people have to turn to something that's actually poisonous that they know is going to ruin their health, but they have no other way to like find food because they weren't able to harvest because it's impacted the agriculture within that region. So these are just some of the impacts that climate change has been having in Malawi in general. But however, there have been some efforts that have been made, such as revising and reviewing the legal frameworks that already exist, such as the National Adaptation Plan, as well as the National Climate Change Management Policy that act as a guide to respond to climate change. So these policies that are there focus on enhancing resilience to agriculture and improving disaster risk management. And also we have climate financing, whereby the country has been receiving climate financing from international partners to be able to fund adaptation and mitigation projects. However, these resources are still not adequate enough to address the problem, and this is something that we also need to look into. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing such in-depth analysis of what's going on now. And I think it's really interesting that finance comes up so much because in December, this is the COP29 is going to be the finance COP, people are saying. So, hearing that it's all happening now, it's maybe the some of the future. We need to think about the present with finance and stuff. So thank you both for those insights. So now, in the spirit of the fact that the UN Summit of the Future does promise action now, and an action pact, Danielle, could you maybe share with us a little bit about action that you're doing right now in empowering young people and helping them to understand how to be a part of decision making and kind of empower them beyond just feeling helpless when you hear climate impacts like this, and it's very overwhelming because like we're not doing enough,
Yeah, surely. So as my role as Secretary General for NMUN, my primary goal has been to create a platform that empowers young people to develop their critical thinking, negotiation and leadership skills and allow them to be able to be empowered to be involved in these conversations. So for anyone listening, NMUN is the world's largest and oldest ongoing university model UN simulation. And it offers a diverse group of informed participants a forum for discussing global concerns in a context that closely parallels the real world. Essentially, it is the UN in a model form. We bring over 2,000 delegates together a year in New York, and students and faculty from around the world. They assume the role of diplomats and ambassadors of an assigned country in order to really propose resolutions addressing sustainable development, human rights, and peace and security as well. We provide students with a better understanding of the inner working of the United Nations, and they also build really key skills to allow them to be involved in these conversations, such as diplomacy and compromise skills. At the 2025 conference, which I serve as Secretary General for, we will be simulating 16 UN committees, varying from the General Assembly Committee, so the first, second, and third committee, the United Nations Environment Assembly, to the Human Rights Committee, and the Security Council. So we really take a broad overview of all of the items that the United Nations addresses in the committees. The topics under discussion by delegates vary from transforming food systems to prevent biodiversity loss, to protection of and assistance of refugees, returnees, and displaced persons. So it really goes through a broad variety of current pressing issues facing the global world. And as well as that, aside from NMUN, I also serve on the board of Youth Advocate Programme Ireland, which provides support programs for young people and their families to strive to amplify the voice of young person and parents and carers through participation. So, yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing about that, Danielle. And I think Laura's just popped in the chat as well, if anyone wants some more information on maybe how to get involved and things for any participants. Because yeah, no, that piece about kind of educating young people about UN spaces is so important, because maybe Mohammed, you could give us a bit of insight here into, what it's like actually at the UN as a young person, because having done the UN Youth Delegate Programme, you'll have seen firsthand what it's like. So what was the kind of young people's role at that, and did you feel there was enough representation?
Yeah, I remember being there my first week this time last year, and just as an 18-year-old, I felt so. I think with any space like imposter syndrome, because it is really not an establishment that is built for young people. So just being in around all these diplomats, just being in at the UN, you really need to cement your place. And as a young person and young people that are there, we should not feel imposter syndrome. We deserve to be there just as much as anyone in that room. Um, and like with the youth delegate program, it's really up to each individual country how much you have, like how much access you have, and how much kind of um, how much you can do while you're at the UN. And Ireland and the mission in Ireland are extremely good with the youth delegate program and letting the youth delegates really kind of be independent and kind of work on things that we're passionate about. So we really got to kind of UN documents, the Pact for the Future that's going to be voted on at the Summit of the Future, and the Declaration on Future Generations. We got to kind of input into that, add our own comments, add kind of recommendations. So there is aspects where it is meaningful, but there's just not enough. And then as a youth delegate, I saw a huge lack of representation from the Global South, particularly young people from the Global South. A lot of the issues that we're discussing are affecting the Global South the most, and they aren't in the room. Particularly within the youth delegate program, it's very European centric, and it's not the way it should be. So me and my co-delegate Alicia, it's something that we really try to work on as well. It's something that we're continuing, like passing on this project, like trying to get the Irish government to fund kind of a youth delegate program in the Global South. But it is really up to each individual country, kind of how your participation as a youth delegate is. And I was quite lucky with Ireland, because Ireland is very good with that. And then overall, just like the UN space, the UN is kind of doing some work. We saw recently the introduction of the new UN Youth Office. So they're really trying to, Philippe, the new kind of special envoy on youth, is really kind of trying to ensure young people are represented, but it's really up to each individual country, and there is pushback from countries about involving young people. But I think as our generation really just needs to persevere and still kind of fight and not give up. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Mohammed, for sharing that. And yeah, no, definitely. I think that passion is something that we all, even though it's really difficult a lot of the time to keep up, need to keep pushing and driving. So building on these kind of points about youth inclusion, it's a good time to look at Concern's very own youth inclusion and the points that came up in the consultations for this Summit of the Future. So climate change and the threat that it's posing to the present and the future came up in the questionnaire. But for those who filled it in, it was really important to highlight that it's an issue that cannot be seen in isolation. And the young people surveyed highlighted that climate change is extremely interconnected with every other global issue. And it might only be one of the Sustainable Development Goals at 13, but there's now not a single goal where climate doesn't have an impact. And I think that's even clearer in what you've already spoken about, Dorothy and Esther, in the current situation in Malawi. So, you know, it's not just climate as its own thing now. So maybe now we just call on Magdalena and Dorothy to share some insights about how interconnected climate change is with other issues that you're dealing with in your activism and work now.
For me, I've always cared a lot about inequality, being from a background where my dad is from an academic family and my mom is from a farming background. So there was always that difference in class at last. And when I learned about climate change and get involved in climate change, I just understood more and more how much about climate change it has to do with inequality as well. Because with climate change, it's always the most vulnerable that get put into even worse positions. And normally the rich people who are causing climate change are at least safe, or they are even better off and profit from climate change. So that's to do with obviously origin, where you're located, how much you're threatened by climate change. It's about race, it's about gender. Women are more vulnerable to climate impacts because they're working in the home more. At the same time, gender-based violence rises with climate impacts and with just the disasters that are coming It's obviously also a topic of age, that young people are much more impacted, whereas we're not directly responsible, or we haven't created those emissions. So really, it's very important to think climate change as an intersectional issue. And I also think it's very important to keep this in mind going forward, that all the solutions we are installing, we want to have them maybe more just than they are right now.
Just to add on to what Magdalena already said, as somebody who's working in the environmental and climate change sector, our main focus, like where I worked, the main focus is on gender inequality and youth and education. And just like Magdalena already said, that it disproportionately affects women and girls more. And why do I say this? Well, in Malawi, especially in rural communities, women are usually seen as the caretakers, the caregivers. They're the ones who are supposed to take care of the family. They're the ones responsible for collecting water. They're the ones responsible for collecting fuel wood, as well as farming as well. Now, when climate change comes and negative impacts happen because of it, such as floods and droughts, then this actually increases the risks to gender-based violence, and it also heightens the workload. It increases the workload for women as well. And just like Mohammed already said, that at the summit, usually it's like in spaces like these, the Global South wasn't really represented, yet they were talked, like the things that affect them were also talked about, yet they weren't even there, they weren't present. So it's the same thing as women. So we focus on ensuring that girls and young women are in decision-making spaces so that they can make decisions that affect them, not just somebody who has no idea what's going on, not somebody who is in the office and has no idea. So we're trying to promote that, and which is why it's really crucial for us to understand that, okay, as much as climate change is disproportionately affecting other people, let them also have that space whereby they can make decisions concerning them. And when it comes to youth and children, like I already mentioned before, that so many children were affected. They couldn't go to school because the schools were turned into camps, and other schools, the infrastructure was destroyed and they couldn't continue. When other people, when their homes are destroyed and they have to move to camp, sometimes the camp is far away from where they were going to school and they won't be able to go to school anymore. And that makes their education become affected. So these are just some of the impacts that climate change has, and it actually connects in different areas, and those are our main focus. So that's just what I wanted to highlight. Thank you. Back to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Dorothy. Yeah, so I think like what you guys are both highlighting and the intersectionality is the concurrent issues that are all happening at once. And I suppose my next question then for Esther, Danielle, and Magdalena is just kind of how, in your work and your activism that you're doing now, is there any trend that you're seeing in how people are feeling with so many global crises and issues happening at once and all exacerbating each other? What's the kind of sentiment you're getting from the people you're working with? Sorry, I've asked 3 people, and so maybe if we jump to Esther first.
All right. So with my experience in working with young people, indeed, with the crisis going on, the overlapping crisis going on, the economic instability, the political instability, and the climate change effects, I feel like a lot of people, especially young people, because I work with young people, so yeah, especially young people are overwhelmed with those issues. But then, however, what I've seen from my experience with working with young people, as I'm saying, is that I've seen a little bit of I would say the spirit of resilience, of stepping up to say, okay, we need to voice out, we need to be involved. We just can't be sitting down to say, oh, we have economic crisis, oh, we have political crisis. We need to step up and talk about these issues. So for me, that is like the positive side. Yes, we're having these issues, we're having this crisis around the world, but a lot of young people have stepped up. They want to make a difference. They want to be involved in these conversations. Even when you check today's webinar, it's just young people, you know? So yeah, that gives us the hope to say, okay, we have these crisis issues, but young people are stepping up and they want to see the change by being part of this type of conversations and making sure that there's justice and sustainability for the future. That's what I can say. Over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Esther. And then maybe Danielle, do you want to?
Yeah, I think we're seeing both a mix of both anger and frustration, but also a fire to do something. As I was saying before, NMUN really serves as a microcosm of the global community. So we bring delegates together from a lot of diverse backgrounds to discuss and negotiate solutions about pressing global challenges. They represent, I suppose, a country within that, but they also bring their own personal perspectives to it as well. And it really is a really empowering and inspirational environment to be in as you walk around the corridors of the hotel and even in the UN building, to see delegates working in working groups on draft resolutions and to hear all the ideas that they're bringing to the table. It really does instill a sense of responsibility in those delegates to contribute to solutions and to make a positive impact. And I think even in my legal practice as well, like I say, individuals are recognizing that even small actions can have a significant impact as well. So the really, I suppose, adage of every little helps, I think is particularly relevant in the context of just everything going on in the world, whether it's as small as reducing waste, volunteering in your local community, supporting wider advocacy efforts and organizations, lobbying on a local or international level. I think a lot of people are really seeing that collective efforts can have meaningful change. And I think that's very timely in terms of this webinar and the Wise Up and the Youth Declaration ahead of Summit of the Future. I also think it's really important for people to continue to challenge their perspectives as we move forward as well, to question assumptions and seek diverse perspectives as we go forward, so we can better understand the interconnectedness of problems and develop more effective solutions. So I think it's a little bit of misery, but also a fire to address the misery as well.
Thanks so much, Danielle. And then Magdalena, do you like?
Yeah, so my perspective of the sentiment right now, I always feel very understood and very comfortable in those climate spaces with other activists, because I feel that they are really affected, but at the same time very, very engaged, and there's so much energy and so much power through doing something that comes with that. And I really like that, I don't know, gives me the most energy from all of this. At the same time, I feel that in other areas of society, for example, at my university, I feel that there is a certain numbness maybe towards these many crises that are going on. There's a lot of shutting off, or not shutting off, but a lot of not thinking about climate change as much, or not taking it into consideration in your daily life. But the biggest thing here, I feel, is that people feel very powerless. Many people don't think they can change policy, and I think we all have that sometimes maybe, but at the same time there is I strongly believe, and I've experienced that there is so much that we can change and that we can do about these things. And I think this a solution to both these, like the grief, but as well as the powerlessness and the numbness, is really to get involved and to do something in spaces where you can find people who are engaged in climate change. And I think that's a really important step to also getting closer and spreading the word and talking about these things, to process things. And
Thanks so much. So I think, from everybody, it's really a case of the kind of anger and frustration turning into hope. And something that I read this week that I thought would really resonate with this was about optimism and hopefulness, because I think it's okay not to be optimistic, because if you look at optimism as a faith in the future that's rooted in the present being okay, and just anticipating that things will turn out okay. I think it's very fair that all of us are not optimistic right now, but I think, really important to keep hopeful, because hope is, a hope for the future based in action. So I think who better to speak to this now than all of our activists here today. So, we can't just sit back and anticipate that things will turn out well. And with panelists like these who aren't just sitting back and working towards a future that we actually want to see, it's the perfect people to speak to us now about what sort of world you want to see in the future. So maybe if everybody would like to share with us kind of your hope for the future, for just in brief. Obviously, you can't fit your whole hope for the future into the panel now. So maybe we'll jump off, starting with Mohammed.
Yeah, I think I'll go with three because I have lots. But my first one would be like equality and inclusion. Like we're seeing our societies across the world are going backwards, especially with discrimination, with racism. Like me, myself, as a young person of color, as an activist in Ireland, I've experienced endless online racial abuse at events. And in the future, I would hate for that. Like being a young person in these spaces is hard enough, and then being a person of color it makes it even more difficult. So I think that for all, regardless of your race, your gender, your age, that there's equality and inclusion for all. Another one will be like climate justice prevails, that we have like in the future, we have transition to fully sustainable energy. I think that would be something that we all want to see. And hopefully it's sooner rather than later. And then my last one, or two more, youth are a lot more empowered, they're a lot more involved in all the decision making spaces. It's just not, they're not tokens, it's not tokenistic. It's really youth are included meaningfully. And then lastly, peace and security. We see across the world the amount of war and conflicts happening. A major hope for me would be in the future that we do see that all communities are safe from violence and conflict. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. And I love your idea of doing three things. That's a nice way to put it that everyone can remember. So I'll now jump to Dorothy, if you want to give us your top three, with the inspiration from Mohammed's idea. So credit to you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. I think that's true. Just like Mohammed said, I would like to see so many things in the future. So I will narrow it down to three. The first thing would be an environmentally sustainable world. I think it's really important that we conserve our resources because they play such an important role in our lives. And we also need to ensure that as much as we are enjoying the benefits of these natural resources, we need to make sure that we are conserving and protecting them so that others can also be able to enjoy, and that's the future generation and the children of today. And the second one is for an equitable and an inclusive future whereby we are practicing equity and everything is just the policies are fair and just the way we do our things. And the last thing I would say is to ensure that everybody's voices are heard, even the people that cannot speak up for themselves, but making sure that we're able to like reach out to them and hear what they have to say and what they think as well, because it's not just only the people that are able to speak or have access to these rooms that have ideas, but even the people that do not have access to these spaces and that are not able to speak up for themselves. So making sure that everybody's voices are heard and also amplified. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. And now maybe Esther, if you'd like to come in with your three of many.
Jenny, so I don't know what happened to my network. I didn't get your question. I just find Mohammed
sorry.
talking.
Sorry, yes, we're talking about our vision for the future. So we started out with asking for a general vision, but Mohammed had a good idea to make it just three things because it would be impossible to fit in every vision we have for the future into just a short answer.
Right. Oh, okay. So it's pretty much the same of what Mohammed and John was talking about. But then for me, I feel like the first one would be youth inclusion. Yeah, like I'm saying that what we have been seeing for the past years is that they, for example, world leaders or other people understand to say, oh, it's time we include these people. As we know that the population, most of the population is young people worldwide. So what they're trying to do, they will just bring us in somewhere. Then we're saying we want to be included from the beginning to the end of different discussions that are concerning us young people. And also the other thing, it's pretty much the same as Mohammed was talking about equality, to say in the spirit of leaving no one behind. When issues are happening, let's not leave young people, let's not leave women, let's not leave the marginalized communities. They need to be involved. And the other one would be, I imagine the future of justice and sustainability, to say the issues that we're dealing with now, and even the issues that we're asking the world leaders at the Summit of the Future this weekend, to say we need justice, we need sustainability when it comes to these global issues. Yeah, I think I would just summarize them like that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Esther. And then Danielle, would you like to pop in with yours now?
Yeah, I suppose my broad want for the world is to see a world where social justice and human rights are not just abstract ideals or rhetoric that we set down in documents, but that they're tangible realities that are embedded in every aspect of our society. So like I see from, I suppose, from a legal perspective, we have all these wonderful declarations, conventions, but I find that they're not necessarily embedded within our society as well. So with doing that, we'd see a world free from discrimination, inequality, and oppression. And I think one thing that people often think of is when they think, I suppose, access to social justice and lack of basic human rights, they often think of it mainly being a global South issue, but it is a global issue at a whole. And if you bring it back to, I suppose, even Ireland, previously when I would have practiced within Ireland, we would have worked with a lot of people who were homeless and who weren't even able to access basic housing and their basic right to housing as well. So yeah, I just, if we could have a world where rather than words, we have, I suppose, tangible realities embedded in society so people could realize their rights, that would be amazing.
Great answer, thank you. And last but not least, Magdalena, with a few of your hopes for the future.
So my general overview hope would be to have new policies that are very, very strict and very bold policies. And but I would say as like 3 examples would be that I would find it great if we could protect nature and see inherent value also in nature, because I think we're at a point right now where, I don't know, nature fights us back because we haven't protected it, and I think it's part of the world that we live in. So that's something that I think should also be a part of these kinds of debates. A second point is I would like to know where my products come from. So when I have a phone or something, or when I buy clothes in a shop here, it's impossible for me to understand where a product comes from, and especially what negative impacts what I do in my life has on other people and on other places. And I think it would be great to live in a world where we actually can understand and have access to the information and where those products are better sourced. And I think that would be a very good step. And there are many more, but lastly, I'm very interested in what in the economy as well, because I feel that it has a big role to play, and capitalism has a lot to do with sustainability and with climate. I think maybe less money should go to the shareholders, and we could have cooperatives of people where the money that is being created in companies and everything feeds back into local communities into people's, where people can come together, and places also for community. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Magdalena, and thank you all for some great visions. If only we could ship you all over for this weekend to to say your piece there, and they might listen. But unfortunately, in place of that, we can't do that. But what we can do is, if you were all to give maybe one sentence to a world leader for this weekend that you want them to pay attention to, you could maybe, if you could all just give us a short message to world leaders now. So kicking back off with Mohammed.
I think whatever I said in my previous answer, that all stands for the leaders, but I think my main one right now would be end the UN Security Council veto, because that is hindering the work of the UN so much. So I think I would want world leaders to work towards ending the UN Security Council veto.
Thanks, Mohammed. And Dorothy?
What I would say is that the youth are watching and we're ready to lead. So open the door for us and trust us, because we need you to make decisions that are honoring future generations and justice, climate justice, equity, and resilience should be at the heart of every policy. That's what I would say. Thank you.
Thanks, Dorothy. And now Esther.
All right, for me, I would tell the leaders to wise up, to say they need to listen to our concerns. We are as young leaders, we're frustrated. We keep telling them our issues, but they're not acting on them. So we're trying to say, act on the issues we're telling you to resolve, and they should listen to our solutions and the recommendations we give them as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. And Danielle?
Yeah, I think one of my big things is just actions speak much louder than words. So to urge them, obviously, to prioritize social justice, human rights, and environmental sustainability, but to make tangible and achievable promises that they'll stick to. I think that's the big issue that we've had with a lot of these declarations, is the actual action behind them in order to achieve them.
Thanks, Danielle. And last but not least again, Magdalena.
A sentence that I like, and it's not very like pedagogically, I don't know, it's not the pedagogically best sentence, but I've actually also told it to politicians before, and I think it's very, very good to mention that, would be, you are not doing enough.
Yeah, that kind of says it all, doesn't it? So that's amazing. Thank you all for that. And so before we go, maybe Esther, you could lead us all out with Concern's call to action for the campaign that you're working on right now.
All right. So as we're saying, from our youth dialogues, we have the youth declaration, and we have our 7 acts there. So I'm kindly urging everyone here to sign the petition. I've seen the link in the chat. Before Zoom clicked me out the other time, I saw the link in the chat. You can repost the link in the chat. Please sign the petition. And also, I'd like to urge everyone here to share it with their networks. I know Dorothy has a wide network here in Malawi. Please share this petition to your networks. And I also know the rest of you have different networks. Please, we need this petition to be signed. We need these leaders to listen to what we are saying. Yeah. And also spread this news in your LinkedIn, your social media platforms. Yeah, we need to make noise on this. So please. Yeah, I've seen the link has been reposted. Please sign and tell other people to sign the petition. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Esther. So now before we go, we have some time for if anybody wants to pop some questions, anyone in the audience, just pop it into the chat. We have one question already. And the question is, how do you manage to stay hopeful and energized to keep taking climate action? So I don't know if any of our speakers want to hop in on that.
Maybe I can come in. For me, what really helps me is finding community. And as I mentioned before, it really inspires me that other people are just doing that for the sake of it being the right thing to do, to take care of the climate, to do something good for the world, to not look away from these things happening, to not look away from equality, and really say like, this is not okay, and to believe in being able to change something, and then actually being able to change something. Yeah.
Thanks, Magdalena. And I think, Dorothy, did you have something to pop in with too? I'm not sure. Dorothy, did you want to add to that question? Yeah.
Yes, sorry, my internet connection was
Don't
unstable.
worry.
What I would say is I'd just like to add on to what Magdalena already said. You need to be able to find your people. There's so many platforms, there's so many networks of young people doing great things, and just being able to reach out to them and collaborate with them, because you need a team. It works everywhere, whether you're in class, whether you're at work, you need a team that supports you, and that's the only way you can keep going, because we're all going through the same thing. Sometimes we want to give up, but having people that you can trust, having people that you look up to, and just having people that you can work with and collaborate with will actually help you to keep going, even if you feel like giving up. And it's also a good thing that you feel like giving up because it means that you're actually doing something. So what I would say is just keep going.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Dorothy. And one final question from the Q&A in the chat. So the question is that youth inclusion and climate change appear to have been the most important issues amongst the young people, but what other issues are particularly important to you? So maybe Esther, do you want to jump in based on the dialogues? Were there any other things that came up?
Yeah, sure. The other issue was about economic stability was one of them. To say, because of other issues, now there's a little bit of more countries are not economically stable. So we are trying to say we need more young people to be empowered so that when it comes to their economic standpoint, they should be better off, because honestly speaking, no one can do anything without being economically empowered. So that was one of them. The other issue was about food and nutrition. Again, country cannot be able to operate if there's no food. So it also goes back to the climate issues as well, to say if we are being affected with climate effects. An example, a very good example, like I keep saying, here in Malawi, when we're still affected by the Cyclone Freddy. We have El Nino, from the past since February, it's still going on. So because of that, a lot of farmers have been affected with they didn't, how do I put this? Yes, they didn't get the produce they usually get when they do their farming. So there's, like Dorothy mentioned, to say there's a little bit of hunger in Malawi, not a little bit. It's a very big issue now where some parts of the countries, they really don't have food. It's the effects of the climate change that brought this. So there's no food, and a lot of people are trying to come up with solutions to say, how do we bring that? So that was also the other issue we're bringing in, to say we want the world leaders to resolve these issues when it comes to food and nutrition, because if people are not able to eat, it means we have a number of people dying as well. There are a lot of effects when it comes to lack of food and nutrition in people. So those are also the things we discussed in the youth dialogue.
Thanks, Esther. And again, you've really highlighted how it's so interconnected, like all of the issues that they all come hand in hand. So another question that we've had from the Q&A, this question is, how can we balance progress with sustainability and environmental concerns? So I might pop to you, Danielle, if you'd like to weigh in on that one.
Yeah, sure. I think obviously you want to achieve stop climate change and achieve sustainability, but you also want to be able to grow economies and to progress. I think it just takes a pivot in a mindset and for governments and countries to turn to renewable sources of energies, transportation, more sustainable agricultural practices to minimize environmental impact. And then also implementing policies and regulations, not just guidelines and regulations, but clear policies, laws and regulations to incentivize businesses to come to countries, but also to adopt sustainable practices and technologies as well. And I think a big thing going forward, what we're going to have to do, as well as implementing laws and policies, but to have a really big investment in research and development so we can find innovative solutions that promote both economic growth and environmental sustainability. But yeah, I really think it's just genuinely like a pivot in the mindset and moving more away from fossil fuels, more towards renewable energies, moving towards sustainable agricultural practices so it's not impacting upon food supply for countries, and then focusing more on sustainable transportation and stuff as well. So a pivot in mindset would be my 2 cents on it.
Thanks so much, Danielle. That's really useful. And there's just one last question in the chat, but we're kind of running short on time now before we have to give our final goodbyes. So I'll just give it over to Mohammed quickly. This is a question for someone who's been in decision-making spaces and maybe even taken part in negotiations. What was your experience like as a young person? And did you feel that you were listened to or that there was even a space for you?
Firstly, thank you for the question. I think being in those spaces, it's very difficult. Even when you're in the room as a young person, it's very difficult to like get your voice across. I've been on so many different committees where I'm the only young person. You just need to advocate harder. You need to make sure that your voice is heard because you've fought to get a seat at the table, and now you need to fight to make sure that your voice is listened to. So for young people, unfortunately, it's a constant battle of trying to get your voice heard. But the one advice I give to any young person I talk or anyone who wants to get involved with activism, with whatever, is just perseverance. Do not give up. Perseverance is so important. I've had so many challenges and failures, and if I let all that backlash or a bump in my journey stop me or a decision maker stop me, I would not be where I am today. So I think perseverance is really important, and it is difficult, but we can do it. We can do it.
That's an amazing message to end on, and it's actually echoing what Christopher, hello Christopher, if you're in the chat, he's put in that he doesn't have a question, but to add to the conversation that as young people we need to make a lot of noise advocating for climate justice and all of the issues, because sometimes it feels like world leaders are not interested, so we have to keep making noise. And yeah, exactly as Mohammed said, if someone pushes back and you stop, then that seems to be the real failure. You know, we have to keep pushing on. So anyway, I just want to wrap up now by thanking you all so much, all of our questions in the chat, for the great engagement. And before we go, just a huge thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today and for all of the amazing work that you're all doing in your respective areas. I know I'm coming away feeling really inspired, that the future is in good hands, even if this weekend the sum of the future doesn't go our way, but we remain hopeful. And maybe now I just pass over to Victoria just to pop on and talk a little bit more about the campaign.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you to our amazing speakers and Jenny for being an incredible host, and that was a really, really interesting discussion. If anyone would like to learn more about our campaigns, be the first to hear about future events and how to sign up and get involved, please sign up to our campaign's newsletter. The link is in the chat. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and that brings our webinar to a close.